Before we start, I just want to say, when I was studying, I remember scouring YouTube looking for interviews of people who did the exam recently, who have some advice to give. So I think if you're trying to study and get a good score, you want to watch the whole video. Go! What's up, everybody? We're live, coming at you from University Hospital of Essen. It's me, not Dr. Boris, with actual doctor, yeah, Dr. J.
Dr. J. Just call me Dr. J. Hi everyone, welcome to this exclusive interview to the USMLE Step 1 with Boris. Boris scored an overwhelming
249.
We're here because we thought it might be a good idea to give you our experiences on how to study on the USMLE. Please feel free to just skip forward to any parts you don't want to hear about. This interview is going to be including the basics, the preparation, the actual test day, the post-exam period, and the recommendations in the end. And I'm going to put down the minutes of where these parts are going to be down in the description box. Let's start with the basics. Okay. It'll be interesting to know what your starting point was. Where are you from and where did you study medicine?
Okay, so I'm from the States, but I went to medical school in Germany, and I took step 1 sometime, if I recall correctly, after the 4th year of a 6-year program. Were
you free during the whole time of your preparation, or did you have any uni work or work that would restrict you a little from studying for step 1? Yeah,
so I started studying for step 1 right after, I think, the 10th semester, or maybe the 8th semester. After the 4th year ended, that's when I began studying, so I used up all my summer break, and then I had to postpone my test by like 2 weeks, so it kind of ate into 2 weeks of the following semester. But for the most part, I was free because I was on break.
How long did it take you from considering taking the test to the actual test date?
I knew when I started medical school here that I would go to America at some point, or at least try to. So I kind of had it in the back of my head that I would take this exam. So I guess maybe like about a year before I took it, I began kind of thinking about how I would do it. But the actual study time was probably about 3 months.
Did you feel familiar with the tested topics on step 1 and the format of the test, the MCQ based test? And did it seem a little familiar to what you were studying in Germany?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I guess yes and no. I mean, all of our exams here are multiple choice. So I was familiar with the style of testing, but the way that the USMLE asked the questions with these, you know, like multiple jump questions where you have to think around the corner, I was not familiar with that. I had to do a good amount of prep to get used to that.
That's, a lot of preparation.
Yeah.
What is your overall impression of the test? Is it a lot of random details to be learned by heart, or is it a lot of processes that need to be understood in order to be able to answer the questions, or are there a lot of old exam questions that you already saw on Q banks?
I did think that the exam was pretty similar to UWorld, which is the #1 resource, obviously.
Never heard of this Q.
What is this Q thing? UWorld? Yeah, the questions were pretty similar to UWorld in terms of content. What was the first part of the question?
What was your overall impression of the test?
It was hard. Hard AF. Don't even kid yourself. This is the hardest exam I've ever taken in my entire life. And I've taken a good amount of exams, I guess, like any other medical student. But this exam, it's no joke, guys. This exam is a beast. I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm not. But you have to come at it knowing that you're going into war, okay? This isn't like hopscotch, all right? This is, you gotta
it's true. Was it a lot of random details to be learned by heart, or was it more processes, a good mixture of both, maybe?
Yeah, I guess it was a lot of like rote memorization, for which I recommend Anki, but we'll get to that later. It is a lot of kind of random details sometimes, but that's what separates, I believe, medical doctors from other medical professionals. You know, if you go to nursing school, if you go to respiratory therapy school, if you go to PA school, you're learning about medicine, but what makes doctors doctors is that deep knowledge of things like pathophysiology, biochemistry, etc. Even if you don't use it later in your career, it's important to learn that when you're coming up to, you know, to distinguish yourself as a physician, I think.
Yeah, that was the basics part.
Awesome.
Now we're coming to the preparation. Is practicing questions only enough to pass the exam? For instance, a pass of UWorld or 2 passes of UWorld?
If you put the question that way, to just pass, I would say yes, it might be enough to pass, but I don't think it's enough to get you a good score. If you want a good score, then just questions alone is probably not going to cut it.
So if just questions alone are not going to cut it, what were your main resources?
All right, well, for step 1, everybody knows UFAP, right? UWorld, First Aid, Pathoma, and then some people say UFAPs, which is sketchy on top. And that's pretty much what I did. I watched all the Pathoma videos, all the sketchy microbiology videos, not pharm.
Is there a specific rule you would suggest? You gotta watch this twice, 3 times, because there are a lot of write-ups and they say, yeah, you have to go through first aid 2 times, 3 times, 4 times.
I mean, I think this might vary for everybody depending on how well you already feel like prepped in that subject. For example, I felt like my school's curriculum for Path was pretty weak. So I watched Pathoma twice, once in the beginning of my dedicated and once toward the end. And I feel like that helped a lot. You got to see where your strengths and weaknesses are. So I don't think that there's one recipe for exactly how many times to watch, but I would definitely recommend UFAPs. Is tried and tested and proven. It's a great method. And then if you have spare time, you can add in things like, I don't know, maybe some lectures for pharm, or maybe some random lectures for biostats. There's that one video on YouTube, we can link that later, that Randy Neal. And Anki. So UFAPs and Anki.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to ask you about too, because UFAP mostly covers the bigger subjects that are gonna be, I don't know, 60-70% of the test. But there are also these minor subjects that we shouldn't forget about, like biochem, pharm, statistics, API, and psychiatry. What would you suggest how to study this?
For that, I mean, I guess you should pay attention in your school psych lectures. I don't know if they're good or not. I think for the exam, it's enough to read, let's say, the psych section in first aid, and then reinforce that knowledge by doing Anki for memorization, and then UWorld questions for application of that knowledge.
For the ethics part, there's also this 100 cases, 100 pages.
Yeah, there's a good book. I think it's called like 100 ethics cases for the USMLE or something. That book is definitely worth a read. You can get through it in like a day, and it's going to help you for step 1, 2CK, and step 3.
So now that we got the main resources covered, where do you start to prep? How do you plan your day, and what did your dedicated period look like? How many hours a day did you study?
Dedicated was rough, my friends. Dedicated was rough.
How long was it? Was it like you set a date, okay, from now on I'm a dedicated, or was it just a phase that you just seemed to happen?
I would say it was more like an airplane flight. It kind of started off a little bit slow, maybe doing like 40 questions a day. Then you got faster, then I was doing maybe like 60 questions a day. And then at some point maybe like 80 questions a day, but no more than that. That's cruising altitude.
Wow, 80 questions a day.
80 questions a day. And it was an all-day thing. I mean, I would go to the library sometime in the morning after dropping off my kid at kindergarten, and then I would study for pretty much all day until it was time to put him to bed at night. So those were a rough 3 months. But I would say start off slow, make a plan, and my plan was literally simple math. I took the amount of days that I had from the time that I started to my test date. Let's say it was like 90 days. I took the amount of questions that were in UWorld, the amount of videos, the amount of chapters to read, everything by the numbers, and I divided that by the amount of days. So I knew approximately how many things I had to do per day to get everything done by, let's say, 2 weeks prior to test date. And those 2 weeks then before test date would give me enough time to review and do some kind of UWorld assessments or NBMEs.
Obviously, first aid seems to be a #1 go-to for everyone prepping for step 1. How would you suggest using it? Because if you start reading first aid, it's just a bunch of bullet points crammed together. Is it very important and dedicated, or is it more before dedicated you would suggest using it?
First aid? Mm-hmm. If you have the time, it's probably wise to begin reading first aid casually, but just to begin, leafing through it in the period before. And then during dedicated, I did give it one more read through, but at that point I would use it more as a reference text. So if I was doing a question and I got it wrong, I would go back to that chapter, take a look specifically what I was missing. And I'm also not the kind of person who fills my first aid with highlighter marks and notations and stickies. My book is pretty clean. I probably could sell it today for them.
Pathoma and Sketchy Micro, everything is very sophisticated in itself. How would you say, or where would you focus on? Would you focus on knowing all the nitty-gritty details, or is it more about getting the main concept of Sketchy? What would you suggest to focus on? Probably gonna say everything. You need to know everything.
Yeah, it's hard, right? I would say for Pathoma and Sketchy, they're concise enough that you can focus on the details without it being overwhelming. A Pathoma video could be anywhere from 4 or 5 minutes to maybe 10 minutes long. Sketchy videos are usually also within the range of 10 minutes. Within that time, it's not so much information that they cover. So I think if they are talking about certain details, little factoids to remember, I think it's worth it to focus on those.
I think especially Pathoma and micro for IMG is important because they automatically cover the most important stuff that you're going to be tested on. You don't have to make the work or look up, okay, what's going to be tested. It's already given out to you.
High yield.
So how much of Anki did you do a day?
Anki. I would say I did about an hour of Anki a day, maybe sometimes an hour and a half. But here's the trick. I didn't do Anki in one shot. I wouldn't just sit down and just do Anki on my phone. I would do Anki in all the times between studying. So for example, on the toilet, Anki. Waiting for the bus, Anki. Just 2 minutes in between doing something, whip out your phone, get a couple of cards in. Anki is really, really useful. I mean, it's been scientifically proven that spaced repetition helps you memorize stuff.
Especially with a single-stranded DNA.
Yeah, all those little details where 1 plus or 1 minus might make the whole thing different. Do a lot of Anki and do it intermittently throughout the day. Maybe during a meal I might get a few cards in. During a break, if I was at the gym between sets during my rest, I would get a couple of cards in.
Oh my god, you're crazy. But it was dedicated 3 months overall?
Yeah, about 3 months.
Yeah. And so you started prepping 6 months out?
Probably about 6 months out, I booked my test date, I kind of got my permit, paid the money, and I began making a plan for how I would approach studying. And in the beginning, I would just kind of, like I said, casually leaf through first aid, take a look at some stuff, just get an idea of what they're even trying to test you on. Because keep in mind, I went to medical school in Germany, so our curriculum is not made for the USMLE. So by going through first aid ones, just real casual, I was able to get a feel for where I stand. Where were my strengths? Where were my weaknesses?
Would you suggest finding a study partner online, for instance, on Facebook? I read that a lot, that people on Facebook groups search for study partners online, just to do UWorld together. Would you suggest that's a good thing, or you didn't have one, right?
I didn't have one. I'm what they call an Einzelkämpfer in German. It's a lone warrior. I don't need anybody's help. I don't need people around me to quiz me. I think if you're a kind of person that studies best in groups, then sure, it might be a great way to find somebody else who's very motivated. But just be careful, because some people, if you're up here and somebody's down here in terms of your knowledge, it might be more of a one-way street. It kind of depends. If you're trying to focus on one subject and your study partner has, I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of it. Personally, for me, it was more about just kind of, sitting down, grinding through it, getting your head in the books, and just getting through those 3 months.
Okay, coming at another great topic, I would say. Are NBMEs important?
Oh, for step 1 or 2? For step 1. I did NBMEs. In fact, I did my dedicated in a pattern where I would do one NBME at the beginning of the week, and then I would do them pretty much on a weekly basis in the last, I think, 8 weeks leading up to the test date. Because keep in mind, step 1 for me was like, in my head, it was the beast of all beasts. I knew I had to really, really like give it my all. I was going ham, as they say. I think NBMEs were helpful, if anything, just because it gives you more questions from the writers of the USMLE themselves. So it gives you an idea of how they think. It's more experience in like a simulated testing environment, because I would do them timed. So I would say for step 1, NBMEs were helpful. I would recommend them. Not necessary, but helpful.
How many NBMEs did you take overall? I
think I did NBME 15, and then like 17, 18, 19, 4. I did 4 or 5 NBMEs.
Did you find out the scores? It might be interesting to know.
Okay, so
to track it.
I did get the scores. And that was another reason why I thought it was helpful, because I was able to see that every week my scores would go up little by little by little. When I did my first NBME, my score was 204, which if that were to be my real exam, it's like barely passed. Like I said, passing is not the problem with these exams, although I guess for some of you who might be taking it after 2022, it might be pass-fail, and at that point, half of what I'm saying is useless anyway. Just pass it, you know? But when I took it, it was a scored exam, and my goal was to score as high as possible. So I was able to see the scores in my NBMEs tick upward ever so slightly, like 204, 210, 216, 222, 228, and it gives you it gives you really good feedback, and also confidence inspiring. You see your scores go up.
If you were to choose a single assessment, which one would you recommend doing?
I would definitely say do the UWorld assessments. They are very predictive. In fact, if you check out Reddit on the Step 1 forums, there should be a thread where some very smart people put together like a chart with correlations to scores on assessment tests and actual scores. And I think the highest assessment value was in the UWorld self-assessment 2, I think. Yeah. I actually scored a little bit lower than my UWorld self-assessment, 254. And then my real score was 249. But that's okay. That little bit of variation is, it's okay.
Depends on the day.
But that's a very, very good assessment test.
That's actually a commonly asked question. How did you motivate yourself to continue? Did you pursue any hobbies? And did you take any breaks during your preparation at all?
Like breaks during the day, or breaks like in the middle of dedicated?
Was there like a period that you said, okay, I need to stop right now, do anything else instead of studying?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest motivator, as cheesy as this sounds, was my family. Because I have family in New York, and here in Germany I have a wife and kids, and I'm trying to get my family back home to America. So for me it was like, it's all riding on this exam. If I don't get a good score, my chance at residency might be shot, and that would essentially end the dream,
That's so inspirational.
Tears. That was a real motivator for me. Like, I was just so determined to get a good score, to do everything I possibly can to increase my chances of matching. And it took a lot of sacrifice. You can ask my wife. She was the one who was sacrificing the most, I guess. And I did take some breaks. I would go to the gym twice a week at least, because all that mental work, you got to balance it out a little bit with some physical activity.
If you haven't tried it out yet, do it.
CrossFit, sort of, patent pending, trademark.
And one last question. Do you think it's likely to fall depressed when studying for Step 1?
Oh man, well, I did spend pretty much my entire summer studying for it. So while all my friends were out enjoying the weather and barbecuing and taking trips and going on vacations, I was at home or in the library. So I guess it is easy to fall into a bit of like a depressed state. But if you can find 1 or 2 hobbies that give you some joy during this time, like working out or playing an instrument or going for a walk or whatever, then, listen, life is not a bowl of cherries, all right? The point is, life is about sacrifices. If you're trying to achieve a goal, and that goal is that important to you, then you got to put in the work and make the sacrifices. Delayed gratification.
Did you shut down social media in your prep?
Excellent question. I actually did. I don't have Facebook anyway, but I did delete the Instagram app from my phone because I was using it way too much normally, and that would just distract me a lot. And that's another thing, right? Think about every time during your day when you like flip open your phone and go on Facebook or Instagram. If you replace those with going on Anki, for example, think about how much time you could spend doing effective test preparation. I kept YouTube though. YouTube is, that's a real addiction.
Okay. Let's move forward to the actual test day.
Yes.
When did you know you want to schedule your test day?
I think I scheduled it kind of based on my school's schedule, because I was starting a new semester and I had mandatory classes where attendance was required. So I kind of tried to schedule it in the very beginning so I wouldn't miss too much of school, but on a day that I didn't have anything that I had to physically be there for.
How far out would you suggest to schedule?
It's a good question. I would say it kind of depends on what the situation is like now because of, scheduling
maybe also
difficulties.
Have a look at your test center if they got spots, because if they run out, you can't really schedule a test day.
I would say schedule it well enough in advance. For me, my thinking was it's always better to have the date that I want ahead of time, and if I really need to, I can move it up, than to come too close and not. But I think if I recall correctly, I must have scheduled about a month out, maybe 5 weeks, something like that.
Did you worry about the enormous day you had ahead of you?
Yeah, I was a little bit anxious. I mean, again, maybe it was all mental games, but in my head, this exam was like the biggest deal of my life for me.
I think everyone can relate.
Yeah, so I was definitely worried, but at the same time, because I was doing NBMEs and the UWorld self-assessments, I saw that my scores were trending upward. And I thought that I was, you got to trust your prep.
That's the best feeling, right? If you see that your hard work actually pays off at some point.
I mean, to start off at a 204 and then go to a 249.
He's on fire, guys. What kind of drinks and snacks did you bring along? That's a kind of a silly question, but still, you got to think about it.
That's a good question, yeah. I bought a bottle of water, a bottle of cola, and
Sugar-free?
No, regular cola. I'm not a coffee drinker, so I did not go crazy on caffeinated beverages. The cola was basically to pull me through the last 3 blocks. I didn't have any coffee in the morning. I just had water, cola, and that's it. In terms of snacks, I brought chocolate. I think I brought peanut butter M&Ms. Ooh. I brought some chewy granola bars and fruit snacks, because I like fruit snacks. And one little tip, if you think that you have a nervous bowel, take 1 pill of loperamide the morning of. Loperamide is an anti-diarrhea pill, right? And I did not have the urge to go poo the entire test. It was clutch.
So how did you schedule the breaks?
Okay, I took a break after every block, and I recommend that to everybody I talk to because I think it's important to come out of there, take a deep breath. I peed after every block, I had some snacks after every block, and a couple of minutes of just chill. You don't need to do 4 blocks and take a half an hour break. You're not gonna have the appetite to eat a whole, bologna sandwich or something. It just makes more sense, in my opinion, to take breaks after every block and just kind of reset and then go back in with a fresh mind.
And also, I think if you have a heavy meal, the parasympathetic nervous system is gonna kick in, and then all the blood is gonna be drained away from the brain. So I don't think it's
high yield.
High yield. I don't think it's the best thing to do on a test day that's long.
Keep it light.
Yeah. Do you remember the first block you attempted? What was the feeling like when you closed the block?
Well, let me begin. When I opened the block, when I clicked begin, the nervousness that I had disappeared. Nervousness builds up And then when the exam starts, it just dropped off because then I was in the zone.
The zone, yeah.
And I saw that the questions were very similar to UWorld, both from content and from the shape and formulation. And I just told myself,
also comfort,
yeah,
right?
just like, hey, it's just like a UWorld block. Just get through it one block at a time. When I closed the block, I was like, wow, you know, it was hard. I didn't know everything, but look at that. I'm already one block in. Just how many? 6 more to go. And yeah, like that for every block.
Do you get exhausted after a while, or were you locked in, like this locked in kind of situation?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say the first 4 blocks, I was good. After that, your brain is not made to take 8-hour-long exams, you know? But I would say when I finished each block, I was definitely happy and relieved. I went back into it fresh, but with every subsequent block, that freshness lasts less and less. And by the time you get to like block 5 or 6, your brain is just like, please end this. So at that point, you begin kind of clicking more from the gut. You don't even think about it. You don't go back and check. You just click and move, click and move.
Yeah. Also, I think it's important to just, if you close a block, just close it also in your head. Don't think about it too much.
Yes.
Each time you go into the exam, don't think about, oh, I just really messed up these first 3 blocks. Each time you go in there, it's a new kind of world.
Yes.
It's always giving you a new chance also to improve yourself.
I did have my first aid book with me in the test center, but I did not look at it between blocks. And I wouldn't advise anyone to do that either. It just messes with your head.
Okay, that was the actual test day. Now moving along to the post-exam period. So I've written this down in bold letters.
What was it like to be done with step 1?
It was great. It was an amazing feeling. I walked out of the exam. It was a dark and chilly October night. And yeah, let me set the mood here, right? And I began walking back to the train station to take the train back home. And it was just like a weight off of my shoulders. I had a feeling that I passed because I just had a feeling that I had enough right. I knew I had enough right. I didn't know how well. I was surprised when I got my score. But I knew that I didn't fail, or at least I didn't have a feeling like I failed. I wasn't happy in the sense that I knew I made some mistakes. You're gonna always remember the mistakes. It's just human nature. But walking out, it was a big, big relief. It was catharsis.
Yeah, and then walking out of the test, you feel like this was something like an NBME, or was it something completely different?
It felt like the exam itself felt more like UWorld in terms of, just from the feel, it felt more like UWorld. But walking out, I felt like I had just left the arena. Like I was a gladiator and I just killed a couple of lions, and then I walked out and I was like, yeah, it was like that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Actually, I know the feeling.
I can imagine because I did it too.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you didn't look anything up during the test in first aid. Did you look anything up you could remember to look up from the test?
Yeah, I think I did, just kind of like out of curiosity, a couple of things.
Sometimes there's this, what was it?
Yeah, what was that really?
It's a good question. Actually, I asked myself this question.
Right. It wasn't like panicky, nervous looking up. It was more like, oh yeah, that was that question. I wonder what that was again. But again, I kept that to a minimum, and I would advise you, if you know that you're a kind of person who tends to like get hung up over stuff or stress, don't even start. I'm the kind of person who like lets things go pretty quickly. So I just took a look at some questions that I remembered in my head.
When did you receive the results?
Yeah, three weeks later. I think it came on time.
It's always a Wednesday
it's always
in
a
3
Wednesday,
weeks. Yeah. Also for step 2, that's actually it for the post-exam period. Now we are getting to the recommendations, which is also the final part of this interview. With the experience you have today, what kind of tips and recommendation would you give yourself looking back?
Looking back, I would say to myself, do more Anki. I really feel like I got a lot of points through Anki, and I really wish I had started earlier. Maybe it might have been overkill, but I feel like if I would have begun doing Anki, let's say a year before the exam. Again, nothing crazy, just casually in between breaks, something like that on the can, you know. I would have probably gotten even a few more points, but Anki is a real game changer, and I feel like a lot of people, especially who are IMGs and not in the American school system, might not be aware of Anki or what it is. It's basically flashcards on your phone, but you can choose on the bottom how well you knew the question. So if you knew it really well, you'll get that card again, but much later. If you didn't know it or knew it poorly, you get the card again sooner. And that kind of way of memorizing stuff, it's called spaced repetition. It's really helpful, especially for memorizing all those annoying little tidbits that you probably will never need again, but Anki's a game changer.
There are a lot of pre-made decks. You don't even have to create your own deck.
Reddit has a subreddit called Medical School Anki. If you look at that subreddit, they have Anki decks for step 1, step 2, step 3, a bunch of other stuff for shelves if you're an American student and you take shelves. So don't sleep on Anki.
Do you feel you've grown from the USMLE experience, not only medically wise, but also as a person, for instance, in terms of stress compensation?
Yeah, it definitely was, I don't want to say life-changing event, but it was definitely a monumentous event. That was the hardest exam I've ever taken. It definitely showed me that I was capable of achieving the things that I put my mind to. It definitely showed me that my way of studying and my way of learning and preparing was effective. Like, on a real note, that kind of sacrifice for one exam, that took a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of support from my friends and family. And it was a real, like, stressful time in my life. And then getting through it and coming out the other side also showed me that there are ways to cope with stress and to come out, come out a winner.
Yeah, that was actually it. The exclusive interview with Boris.
Step 1.
Okay, if you have any further questions, please feel free to put them down below. We'll be able to answer them, hopefully, even if Boris is gonna be moving to the US soon. Maybe we can arrange a Skype meeting, or I'll just come visit you wherever you might end up. You don't know yet either, right?
No idea.
So this is gonna be interesting too, where we all gonna be ending up, because I was supposed to go to the US, but since I'm not a green card holder or a US citizen, I can't travel to the US right now.
Also coronavirus. The Rona done messed everything up.
If you want us to do the exact same interview for step 2, give this video a thumbs up, and we're gonna continue to do videos like this. Always subscribe to this channel. You're always welcome to give your input, and yeah, gonna keep you posted as much as we can.
See you in the next video.
Bye.